The Dragon's Revenge, or The Scouring of the Stag and Lion, a record of the lives, deeds, and tragedies of the Westerosi noble houses during the era known as the Dragon's Revenge, as set down by Archmaester Corrin and transcribed by Maester Alistair. The Stag was crowned. Robert Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. It had been a year since Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, Lord Paramount of the North, had marched on the armies of the Mad King, Viserys Targaryen. With the help of the Vale and the Riverlands, the rebel forces overwhelmed the Loyalists in a year's time. The end of the war, however, would show the depravity of the rebel cause, as Tywin Lannister, fearing his late intrigue into the war would make him seem untrustworthy to the new king, ordered Sir Gregor Clegane and Sir Emery Lorch to kill Princess Elia Martell and her children. It was in this action that the embers of Dragonfire, thought extinguished by Robert Baratheon, would be lit again. It is with Doran Martel and his brother Oberyn that the seeds of the wars to come would be sowed, and also who our story will now swing to. After a year of fighting against the rebels, the Martel brothers found themselves on the losing side of the war, and with their sister murdered without any punishment on the perpetrators from the new king. The only act of apology offered the Martel family was a spot on the small council for Doran. The brothers were outraged, not only by the lackluster apology, but also the indication that Lannisters were above the law when it came to doing the new king's unscrupulous deeds. With this, the brothers could not abide this new king, and vowed to each other on a dark night in the water gardens of Sunspear to overthrow this new king and restore Targaryen rule to the land of Westeros for the memory of their sister and her murdered children. To this end, they would need allies. Securing an alliance with the Reach would be tricky. The Reachmen and the Dornish had never seen eye to eye, but in recent years their relationship had been on an upturn. Doran hoped to capitalize on this by sending an envoy of his brother, his young son Quentyn, and several high lords to Highgarden to pursue Mace Tyrell into a betrothal between his young daughter and Quentyn. After a week's stay and many a joyous late-night party later, Mace Tyrell gave Doran the yes he was hoping for. A formal military alliance hadn't been agreed to as of yet, but Doran hoped that would come later. Doran would set his eyes on Ned Stark next. Ned was one of Robert's closest friends before the war, but Doran had heard rumors of a falling out over the murder of Elia's children. Doran hoped to use this to bring Ned Stark into the triumvirate he was trying to form. This time, however, he would lead the envoy himself, fearing his brother's personality would upset the Northmen's sensibilities. With him he brought his young daughter Arianna. He wished to betroth Arianna to Ned Stark's bastard, Jon Snow. Bastardy was not as frowned upon in Dorne as it was in the northern kingdoms. Doran tried to take an interest in northern affairs, taking time to learn about Winterfell, northern customs, and the Night's Watch. Even so, it took over a moon's time for Ned to warm to Doran. They began to take horse rides together, and Ned allowed Doran to attend court with him. It's on one of these horse rides that Doran brought the idea of a betrothal between their children. Ned was cold to the idea at first, but after a few weeks and a talk with his wife, Catelyn Tully, Doran was given a begrudged yes. With this, the triumvirate was secured, and Doran could move on to a plan with greater risk. If the king wouldn't punish the men who raped and murdered Elia Martell and her children, then Doran would do it himself. Amory Lorch was first to taste the spear of Dorn. Amory lived in a place called Glitterdale in the mountains of the Westerlands, known for its treacherous mountain pass. Amory was often known to travel between his home and Lannisport quite frequently by carriage. A carriage is quite unwieldy on the mountain pass that lead to Lannisport from Glitterdale. Dorn was able to bribe the carriage driver that was hired for Amory's next trip into purposely plunging the carriage off a ravine. Time would only tell if this plot would succeed. As luck would have it, he didn't have to wait for long. Within a few weeks, Dorn was told that Amory meant to set off on his trek much earlier than expected. During the late hours of the night, Amory would take a final plunge into the ravines that made up the area around Glitterdale. The driver who had helpfully reported the deed was thrown into the ravine the following day, as no loose ends could be left untouched. The Mountain, the Rapist, Gregor Clegane. He would be next. It was unknown if Gregor suspected anything when he was told of Amory's death, but it is unlikely, not only for the lack of evidence, but of the slow mind that Gregor possessed. As Doran sent out agents to see what could be done to bring down the mountain, the spy master of Byford, a commoner named Raymond, was tracking one of Doran's agents. This could not be allowed. Doran gave the order to murder the man, which was carried out swiftly and without mercy. Despite the grave mood that had taken hold of the Martel family during this time, there was some good news to be had. Doran's wife, Malaria, was pregnant with their third child. The people of Doran rejoiced, and much celebration was had in the streets of Sunspear. Even more good news would come only days later, when Doran's agents reported a plan to kill the mountain. The mountain liked to frequent a balcony in his father's keep, a balcony that could be made weak and topple under his vast weight if the right amount of money was exchanged with the right hands. Doran ordered it to be so. A few weeks later, Gregor, heading out onto the balcony to enjoy his breakfast with a view, was shocked when the platform gave way and he dropped 5 stories, hitting the ground like a piece of rotten fruit, covering several poor gardeners with his viscera. Elia Martel, Aegon, and Rhaenys were finally avenged. The brothers celebrated long into the night, until a courier arrived with the grave news that the whole of the Westerlands knew who killed Gregor Clegane. Before the carpenter who loosened the boards of the balcony could be killed, he had second thoughts about the whole ordeal and wrote a letter detailing the plot. That letter made its way into the hands of Tywin Lannister, and it didn't take anyone much time to figure out who could be behind the death of Sir Gregor Clegane. They say you give up a few things, seeking revenge. Doran, spending more time away from court than at it, left his pregnant wife alone without any comfort but from her maids. It is rumored that she began spending more and more time with Lord Fowler, but we'll not give those rumors any heed other than to mention them as a sign that even the court gossipers could see that Doran's personal life was suffering from his new purpose. Late in the year of 285, Malario gave birth to a healthy son, whom Doran would name Tristane, though he was far and away of court at the time of the birth, and the new babe would be nameless for a moon before a raven could arrive. The reason for Doran's absence were not because of his small council duties, but rather the final part of the first phase of Targaryen restoration, the assassination of Tywin Lannister. While Sir Gregor Clegane and Sir Amory Lorch were the ones who raped and killed Elia Martel and her children, they would have only done so with orders and the guarantee of no repercussions from such an action. The only person who could have given them such guarantees and protections were Tywin Lannister, no matter how much he denied it to Doran's face. Killing Tywin Lannister would be the hardest endeavor of the Martell brothers' plan. Tywin was well guarded both in King's Landing by his son and Kingsguard member Jaime Lannister, and in Casterly Rock by a household guard. Tywin, also a feared man, which made it very difficult to find anyone to bribe to help in the plan, or even willing to talk about it, which made the agents have to be even more careful in case anyone decided to tell Tywin of all the strange questions being asked around Casterly Rock. While they waited for a plan to present itself, word came from Highgarden. Mace Tyrell had agreed to a military alliance. The Martel brothers had another night of celebration before going back to the day-to-day planning. Ned Stark was still unreceptive to the idea, and Doran was still thinking of a way to convince the Northmen that an alliance would be in his best interest. During the first moon of 286, Lord Weil, an always loyal vassal of House Martel, came forward to Doran about a plan to kill King Robert that he had been concocting and wished for financial and manpower support from Doran. After thinking it over, Doran agreed to help but didn't have the time to participate in planning personally. The death of King Robert would put the realm in chaos. Since the heir apparent was a 2-year-old girl, it was doubtful if any lord of the realm would support a woman or even a child on the throne. If the plan was successful, it'd give large favor to the Targaryen restoration cause. It was time to check on the rightful king of the Iron Throne, Viserys Targaryen, the last dragon. Viserys Targaryen and his young sister Daenerys were on Dragonstone as the war ended. Sir William Darry, once Marshal at Arms for King Aerys, was tasked with protecting the young prince and princess, and when word reached them that King's Landing had fallen, he and 4 loyal men took the royal children across the narrow sea to Braavos, where he hoped they'd be safe. Doran sent his brother Oberyn on a secret trip to Braavos to visit the young prince and let him know he had not been forgotten, and that when the time was right, he'd be brought to live in Sunspear. While in Braavos, Oberyn secured a loan with the Iron Bank, and when he returned to Sunspear, he returned with a small fortune. Doran hoped to use the money to secure a military alliance with Eddard Stark. The plan was 2-part. One, to supply aid to the Night's Watch in supplies and men from the dungeons of Sunspear, and the hope this would endear Lord Stark to the Dornish. The North was always having trouble with keeping up with winter stockpiles, and the rest of the money was used to buy large food shipments from Reach farmers to be sent north. Late in the year 286, Doran made one more visit to the North, where he finally got an agreement to a military alliance. Whether this was due to Ned Stark's honor or their new friendship, it is not for me to say. With the triumvirate pledged to help each other in any armed conflict, secured in blood, Prince Viserys and Princess Daenerys, along with Sir William Darry, were taken from their exile across the narrow sea and brought home to Westeros. Arya Hoat, Prince Doran's bodyguard, would take over as a guardian for Viserys, teaching him the ways of war and swordplay, while Doran taught the boy of rulership. Daenerys was yet still a babe, and was allowed to play among the water gardens under the watchful eye of Sir William Darry. However, 6 moons later, in the year 287, disaster struck the triumvirate. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, was struck down in a trial by combat, ending any hope of support from the north. Doran was distraught from the news, until his brother, Oberyn, suggested an expensive plan to kill Tywin Lannister. Oberyn had traveled far and wide in his youth and had seen many of the free cities, and knew of a group of men from Braavos called the Faceless Men, said to be able to kill anyone at a high price. Doran, at first, was uncomfortable with the plan. The treasury couldn't handle an expense of this magnitude, but when his brother reminded him of why they had done all this, the choice didn't seem that hard anymore. So it was that in the last moon of the year 287, Tywin Lannister would die mysteriously in his chambers in the Red Keep, under the guard of his son, Jaime Lannister. The court would gossip over the cause for weeks, but the Grand Maester was never able to find a cause for the death and put it down as old age. The young boy Tyrion Lannister would become Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, and with any luck, would keep it out of joining the war.